Chapter 1. The 3 a.m. Call. The call came at 3:07 a.m. Lucas Nguyen was awake, not because he was waiting for anything, but because sleep rarely visited him on Sunday nights. He had just finished folding a pile of laundry and was reaching for his mug of cold tea when the phone buzzed. "Mom, Chicago," flashed on the screen. For half a second, Lucas considered letting it ring. Calls from his mother at any hour rarely carried anything new, only echoes of concern about his lack of progress or subtle reminders of how well his older brother Brian was doing. But 3 a.m.? That wasn't normal. He swiped to answer. "Lucas?" Her voice wasn't stern, wasn't brisk. It was small, cracked, like she was holding something that might shatter. Brian is gone." Lucas blinked. "Gone?" He collapsed. "At home. They said it was sudden. The hospital couldn't. They couldn't bring him back." Silence. Lucas didn't feel the tears. Not yet. What he felt was an odd floating sensation, as if someone had yanked the floor beneath him but hadn't told his body to fall. By noon, Lucas was on a plane back to Chicago, a city he hadn't returned to in almost 3 years. He remembered his last visit clearly. Christmas. A dinner filled with congratulations aimed at Brian. Awkward small talk and the quiet ache of never being asked, "How are you really doing, Lucas?" When he arrived at the house, the same suburban home with beige siding and a too-neat lawn, it looked exactly as it did in his memory. But everything felt wrong. The front door opened before he knocked. His mother stood there, older than he remembered, face pale and hollow. She didn't cry. She didn't hug him. She simply said, "They'll be bringing the body tomorrow morning. Can you help set up the guest room?" "No, I'm glad you're here." "No, how are you holding up?" "Just a to-do list." As always, Lucas nodded, wordlessly, and followed her inside, into the silence of a house that once held 2 sons, but only ever truly praised one. In the guest room, while placing clean sheets over a too-firm mattress, Lucas's hand brushed against a stack of photo albums on the side table. The top one read, "Brian, Stanford to Success." He didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed, stared out the window, and whispered into the still air. "What happened to you, Brian? And why do I feel like I'm about to learn things I was never supposed to know?" Chapter 2. The House That Forgot Me. The morning air in Chicago was dense with late summer humidity. Through the window of the guest room, Lucas watched a squirrel scamper across the telephone wire, pausing at one point to stare right back at him, like it knew he didn't belong here. Downstairs, muffled voices drifted in from the kitchen. His mother, moving briskly. A neighbor offering condolences. The clatter of teacups that didn't match. Grief in his family always came in porcelain and small talk, not tears. Lucas took a deep breath, ran a hand through his thick black hair, and finally stepped into the hallway. The house smelled the same. Lemongrass cleaner. A faint trace of soy sauce and tiger balm. The carpet still creaked in the same spots. But something else lingered too, something hollow. As if the walls were holding their breath. He entered the kitchen. His mother turned, startled for a split second, then quickly recomposed. "Oh, you're awake. There's banh mi on the table. Auntie Tuette brought them." Lucas nodded. He glanced around. No sign of his father. "Where's Dad?" "Want to pick up more folding chairs. We'll need extra seating for the memorial." Lucas tried to meet her eyes. "Mom, what exactly happened?" She hesitated, butter knife still in hand. "They said heart failure. Sudden. No warning. Erica called the ambulance. But it was too late." Lucas sat down slowly. The words sat uneasily in his chest. Was he sick? Stressed? His mother frowned. "He never said anything. You know Brian, he was strong. He didn't like to worry us." Lucas almost laughed. Strong, the word had been used so many times it had lost all meaning. Strong meant silent. Strong meant overworked. Strong men don't talk about how you're really doing. His mother continued. He worked hard. That job was demanding, but he was rising so fast. Vice president by 32. Lucas murmured. And what did it cost? She blinked. What? Lucas shook his head. Nothing. Forget it. She turned back to her tea. He knew that look. It was the don't push this expression she wore whenever something didn't fit her version of the world. Later that afternoon, guests started arriving for the memorial. Colleagues, church friends, neighbors, people with crisp shirts, perfect sympathy faces, and stories about how brilliant Brian was. Lucas stood near the staircase, mostly invisible, listening. He was always the one to organize our fundraisers. So driven. We all knew he was going places. Just last week, he was at that fintech summit in DC. Imagine the pressure. Lucas nodded politely. He didn't correct anyone. Didn't ask, did he ever look tired to you? Did he ever confide in you? Did he ever say, I want out? Because no one wanted to talk about cracks. Only the marble finish. At one point, Erica entered the room, dressed in black. Her eyes were glassy. Her lips tightly pressed, the picture of composed grief. But when her eyes met Lucas's, something flickered. Not pain, not sadness, recognition, and maybe relief. After the last guest left, Lucas lingered in the dining room, picking at a plate of fruit no one had touched. Erica approached quietly. Thanks for coming back. Lucas looked up. You think I wouldn't? She hesitated. Then said, I didn't think anyone would come back for the real Brian. Lucas's pulse quickened. What do you mean? Erica's eyes were tired. Too tired for pleasantries. Just, when you're ready. I have something to show you. Lucas stared at her. Ready for what? She looked over her shoulder, then back at him. The parts of him no one wanted to see. Chapter 3. The man everyone missed. And no one knew. The room Erica led him to used to be Brian's home office. Lucas hadn't stepped inside it in years, not since Brian moved back from Stanford and their parents proudly gave him a proper adult space. It was the room where Brian did Zoom calls, closed deals, and received praise in family group chats for being so business-minded. Now it was too clean, too empty. Lucas looked around. The desk was spotless. Books alphabetized. No dust. No personal mess. Everything in its place except, perhaps, the person it once belonged to. Erica closed the door gently behind them. He kept 2 drives, she said softly, reaching into a drawer. One for work. One for himself. She handed Lucas a flash drive. Plain. No label. I only found this last night. Hidden under the drawer lining. Lucas took it, confused. You haven't opened it? She shook her head. I'm not ready. But maybe you'll see something I missed. Lucas held it in his palm like it weighed more than plastic. Why me? Erica looked at him. Voice barely above a whisper. Because I think Brian trusted you more than he knew how to show. That night, in the guest room, Lucas sat cross-legged on the bed with his laptop open. He plugged in the drive. A folder popped up, not for public. Inside were subfolders. Voice memos. Notes to self. Drafts never sent. He opened the first memo. Pressed play. Brian's voice filled the room. Not the polished version. Not the one that delivered speeches or gave toasts. A voice tired. Raw. Honest. March 4th, 2:11 a.m. I can't sleep again. Erica's worried. I know, but I keep telling her I'm just wired. I've been wired for 3 years now. Sometimes I walk past a mirror and I don't recognize myself. Like I built this person from bits of LinkedIn posts and family expectations and forgot who was underneath. Lucas froze. Every word hit like a quiet explosion. I think about Lucas a lot lately. I envy him. He doesn't pretend. He doesn't perform. I used to think that was weakness. Now I think, maybe it was courage. Lucas paused the audio. His chest was tight. Not from pain, from recognition. All these years, he thought Brian never saw him. Turns out, Brian saw too much. He opened the folder titled Drafts Never Sent. Email after email. Half written. Unsaved. Addressed to no one. Or everyone. One subject line stood out. To my family if I ever disappear. Lucas clicked. The message was unfinished, but even in its fragments, it ached. You'll say it was sudden. But it wasn't. It was years in the making. You just didn't want to see the signs. I was your golden son. I played the role so well that I forgot how to be a person. Lucas closed the laptop. Sat in the dark. He didn't cry. Not yet. But for the first time since Brian died, he felt close to him. Not as the perfect son. Not as the one who always got it right. But as someone who, just like Lucas, had been quietly screaming in a house full of praise. And no one heard it. Until now. Chapter 4. The email that was never sent. The following morning, Lucas sat at the same kitchen table he grew up around, sipping lukewarm coffee while his parents spoke quietly in the next room. They were talking about arrangements. About who would speak at the memorial mass. About which photo to use for the program. The photo, of course, would be the one with Brian in his navy suit, handshaking the CEO of some bank. Eyes bright with performance. Lucas stared into his mug. The steam was gone. Back in the guest room, he reopened the folder on the flash drive. Double-clicked the draft with the subject line that haunted him. To my family if I ever disappear. It wasn't a suicide note. It wasn't even finished. But it was a fracture line straight through the version of Brian the world celebrated. You never asked if I wanted any of it. Mom, Dad, I know you're proud of me. I hear it in the way you talk to strangers, in the way you say my name like it means more than just me. But do you know how many nights I sat in this very room wondering what would happen if I just stopped? Stopped being impressive. Stopped being what you needed. Lucas scrolled. The cursor blinked after the last sentence. Lucas, you were always the one I couldn't look at. Because you reminded me of who I was before I became this. A breath caught in Lucas's throat. He leaned back in the chair. The ceiling above him was still painted with faint glow-in-the-dark stars from when they were kids. He remembered how Brian used to tease him, not cruelly, but with that older brother superiority. But this wasn't a voice of someone superior. This was someone suffocating. And then he saw it, a voice memo file saved with the same date as the draft. He clicked it, Brian's voice again. This time slower. Not rehearsed. I don't know if I'll send this. I probably won't. But if I do disappear, not die. Just vanish, maybe someone will read this and understand. I didn't want to be a statue. I just wanted to be seen. Without having to shine so damn bright all the time, Lucas shut the laptop. His heart pounding. That evening, after dinner, Lucas found his mother folding towels in the laundry room. She looked surprised to see him standing in the doorway. Everything okay? She asked. Still folding. Lucas hesitated, then said quietly. Did Brian ever talk to you about being unhappy? She paused mid-fold. No. Never. Lucas studied her face. Asterisk, are you sure? He didn't say anything about work, about pressure. Lucas, she said, a little sharper now. Your brother was strong. He carried so much, and he never complained. That's why we were so proud of him. Lucas took a step closer. Maybe he didn't complain, because he didn't think you'd want to hear it. She looked at him for a long moment. Something flickered in her expression, doubt, maybe, or guilt. Then she turned away. I have to finish these towels. Lucas stepped outside into the cooling Chicago night. The air smelled of grass and pavement. He looked up at the sky, only a few stars visible through the city haze. He pulled out his phone and texted Tina. I think my brother was trying to tell the truth before he died. And no one wanted to hear it. A moment later, she replied. Then it's your turn to tell it. Start with me. Lucas exhaled, slowly. For the first time in a long time, he felt something unexpected. Not anger. Not grief. Purpose. Chapter 5. The Truth Behind the Frame. The framed photo sat in the living room like an altar. Brian, perfectly lit, tie straight, smile just wide enough, stood next to a city council member during a charity fundraiser. His name had been engraved on the brass plate below. Brian Nguyen, community builder, financial visionary, beloved son. Lucas stared at it from the couch, the weight of those words pressing down on him like a hand on his chest. He looked around. Every wall in the house had some version of Brian. Brian shaking hands. Brian cutting a ribbon. Brian giving a speech. Not one photo of him mid-laugh. Not one where he wasn't polished to perfection. Lucas stood up and walked closer to the photo. On instinct, he lifted the frame from the wall and flipped it over. There was something taped to the back. A folded piece of paper, old and yellowing. He peeled it off carefully. Opened it. It was Brian's handwriting. Scratchier than usual. Rushed. Maybe angry. I used to think success would earn me love. That if I became someone everyone admired, maybe I'd be safe from disappointment. Maybe I'd finally be enough. But every award feels like a chain. Every compliment a rehearsal for the next mask. Sometimes I walk past Lucas's Facebook, photos of him with kids at that nonprofit. Smiling. Actually smiling. And I think he gets to live. I just get to perform. Lucas folded the paper, held it against his chest. The truth had never made it to the front of the frame. It was hidden. Always hidden. Like the part of Brian that no one wanted to admit existed. That night, Lucas waited until his parents had gone to bed. He sat down at the dining table, pulled out his laptop, and opened a blank document. He began typing. Not an article. Not a confession. Just a record. A reckoning. He wasn't a visionary. He was a son. A brother. A boy who wanted to rest. He made it look easy so you wouldn't ask why it felt impossible. You praised him into silence. Lucas wrote for 2 hours. When he stopped, he saved the file as the man behind the frame. And for the first time, he thought maybe Brian wouldn't mind being remembered this way, not as the marble statue, but as the man who cracked beneath the weight of it. Before heading to bed, Lucas walked into the living room again. He picked up the photo, replaced it with another, one he found in an old shoebox earlier that day. Brian, age 17. Sitting barefoot on the lawn, eating instant noodles with Lucas beside him. Both of them laughing. Shirtless. Unfiltered. He placed it on the mantel. No caption. No plaque. Just Brian. Just human. Chapter 6. A seat at the table I was never invited to. Sunday dinner was quiet. Lucas sat at the edge of the table, where he'd always sat as a kid, the seat closest to the hallway. Farthest from the conversation. The chair that let him leave without being noticed. Across from him, his mother served rice with her usual precision. His father read the label on a bottle of fish sauce like it might hold answers. Neither of them mentioned Brian. Not really. Just phrases like, "The ceremony was beautiful." Everyone said such kind things. He touched a lot of lives. Lucas stirred his rice. The urge to ask what about his life burned in his chest. But he swallowed it until his mother spoke. "It's nice having you home, Lucas." Lucas looked up, unsure if it was a trap. "It doesn't really feel like home." She blinked. "Why not?" He gave a half laugh. "Because I was never really at the table, was I?" Silence. His father put the fish sauce down. "Don't say that. We always cared about you. You cared. You just didn't see me." His mother frowned. "That's not fair. We came to your graduation." Once, Lucas replied. "Brian had 5. You flew out every time. You had his acceptance letter framed. Mine got buried under his trophies." His mother inhaled sharply. His father's shoulders tightened. Lucas leaned forward, Not angry, just honest. I used to think maybe if I got louder, did more, achieved more, you'd turn your heads. But then I realized something. I wasn't failing at being a good son. I was just invisible at a table already full of pride. He expected them to argue, to deflect, to deny. Instead, his mother looked down at her hands, knotted together in her lap. Brian never told us he was tired, Lucas said softly, because he didn't think he was allowed to. His father cleared his throat. You think we made him feel that way? Lucas held his gaze. I don't think it. I know it. The room sat still. The only sound was the faint hum of the fridge. Then, slowly, his mother spoke again. You're right. Lucas blinked. She looked at him, and really looked, for maybe the first time in years. I was so proud of Brian. I forgot how proud I should have been that you never faked who you were. Lucas didn't cry, but something unlatched in him. Like a window finally cracked open after years sealed shut. His father shifted in his seat. You want to sit here next time? He asked, gesturing to Brian's old chair at the head of the table. Lucas smiled. No, I'll keep the seat. He tapped the edge of the table. I just want to know. I'm finally invited. His mother reached across the table and placed her hand over his. No grand apology. No melodrama. Just warmth. And presence. For the first time, the seat wasn't cold. It was his. Chapter 7. When Erica told me the whole story. Lucas didn't expect to see Erica again so soon. She texted 2 days after the family dinner. If you're still in town, there's something I think you should hear. I wasn't ready to say it before. He replied simply. I'm here. When? That evening. But didn't want to be alone either. Erica wore a gray cardigan, her hair tied back. No makeup. No armor. Lucas ordered chamomile. She didn't order anything. They sat in silence for a few moments. Then Erica finally said, the day Brian died, we fought. Lucas's hand froze over his cup. Erica stared at the table, fingers curled into her sleeves. It wasn't dramatic. No yelling. Just the kind of fight that comes after months of everything bubbling under the surface. About what? Lucas asked, voice quiet. She looked up at him. About how he was disappearing. Lucas stayed silent. He wasn't sleeping. He barely ate. But whenever his parents called, your parents, he'd sit up, fix his voice, and give them the same speech. I'm doing great. Promotion's coming. Got the bonus. She paused. But when he hung up, he'd sit on the floor of our bathroom for hours. Just sit. Sometimes cry. Most times just stare at the tile. Lucas exhaled. He didn't know this Brian. And yet he did. Why didn't you say anything sooner? Erica hesitated. Because I thought maybe I was overreacting. I mean, everyone loved him, right? I thought I was the broken one. The bitter wife. Her voice cracked. But the truth is, I saw him unraveling. Slowly. Quietly. And I did nothing. Lucas shook his head. You were the only one who saw him at all. She smiled, but it was hollow. The night before he died, he told me he was thinking about taking a leave. Said he wanted to do something simple like teach. Or volunteer. Said he wished he'd done what you did. Lucas blinked. Me? Erica nodded. He envied you. Said you were the only person he knew who didn't wake up already wearing a mask. The words hit Lucas like an unexpected wind. Not painful, just weighty. Erica reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. He kept this hidden. I found it wedged behind the bookshelf after he died. He never let me read it. But I think you should. She slid it across the table. Lucas picked it up. The cover was plain black. No title. He flipped to a random page. I told Lucas once that being ordinary scared me. Now I think being worshipped scares me more. He turned the page. If I disappear, I hope someone like Lucas is still around. Someone who knows how to be real when the rest of us are just reflections. Lucas closed the notebook slowly. Erica stood. That's all I wanted to say. I don't want anything from you. I just wanted you to know. He did see you. Maybe not in the way you hoped, but he did. Lucas stood too. For a moment, they just stood across from each other, a shared silence between them. Then she said, I'm sorry he never told you himself. Lucas looked down at the notebook in his hands. Me too. That night, back at the guest room, Lucas lay in bed, the notebook on his chest. The house was silent, but not hollow. Brian had been worshipped. But Lucas had been trusted. And maybe that meant more. Chapter 8. The first time I said I was angry. It was raining the next morning. Thin, steady sheets. Like the sky was letting go of something it had held in too long. Lucas stood in the kitchen, pouring hot water over a tea bag, when his father walked in, slippers dragging. Hair still damp from the shower. He looked at Lucas, then at the notebook on the counter. Still reading. Lucas didn't answer right away. His father opened the fridge, pulled out a carton of orange juice, and asked like it was casual, like it wasn't a crack in the wall of decades-old silence. You think we failed him? Lucas stared at his tea, watching the steam rise. I think we didn't listen. His father didn't reply. Lucas set the mug down. I've been angry for a long time, Dad. It came out before he had a chance to edit it. It just dropped into the room. The truth, finally given permission to breathe. His father froze. Lucas continued, voice calm but firm. Not just because you praised Brian more. That's easy to blame. I was angry because you didn't see me. Because when I tried to talk, you'd say, talk less, do more. When I told you I didn't want to go into business, you said I'd regret it. When I moved to Minneapolis to work with teenagers no one cared about, you asked how I'd pay rent. He looked at his father now, really looked. You thought I was soft, passive, that I was wasting potential. But I was choosing a life I could actually survive in. His father sat down slowly. His hands were trembling. I didn't know. Lucas cut in gently. You didn't want to know. They sat in silence. Only the sound of the rain tapping the window. Finally, his father said, voice hoarse. I didn't know how to love two sons differently. Lucas replied, you didn't need to love us the same. You just needed to love us fully. His father's shoulders sagged. I saw Brian becoming everything I wished I was. I clung to him. And I didn't see what it was doing to him or to you. Lucas took a breath. A part of him had waited his whole life for this moment, not to make his father feel guilty, but to be able to say it. Without shame. Without begging to be understood. His father looked up at him. I'm sorry, Lucas. I really am. It didn't fix everything, but it loosened something in Lucas's chest, like a knot he didn't know was there had quietly, finally, begun to untangle. Later that day, Lucas walked into Brian's room one last time. The light came in soft through the blinds, the bed still untouched, the chair still turned away from the desk. He stood in the center, notebook in hand, and whispered, I was angry at you too. You know. He looked up. Because you didn't tell me. Because you left me alone to carry the mess you couldn't anymore. He swallowed. But I get it now. You were tired. And I was quiet too long. He opened the notebook, flipped to the final page, and wrote a single sentence. I'm still here, Brian. And I'm finally making noise. He closed the book. And walked out. Not away. Just forward. Chapter 9. The hidden folder in Brian's old laptop. It was supposed to be the final errand before Lucas left. Erica had called that morning. I'm clearing out some of Brian's things, she said. Voice steadier now. There's a storage box with some electronics. His old laptop's in there. I was going to donate it, but I don't know. Something told me to ask you first. Lucas met her later that afternoon. The box was in the garage, the same one where Brian had once built model airplanes, where their dad used to polish the same Honda for 15 years. Inside was a stack of chargers, a cracked iPad, and the laptop, a thin, silver MacBook with a faint scratch on the lid. Lucas remembered Brian using it during grad school. Sleek. Perfect. Just like everything else about him. Lucas took it home. That night, sitting cross-legged on the guest bed, he opened the laptop. To his surprise, the password wasn't locked. No encryption. No fingerprints. Just a blank login screen. Username, b.nguyen. Password, BluePhoenix33. It worked. The desktop loaded slowly. The battery was dying. Lucas plugged it in. Familiar folders, finance. Work docs, investments, photos. All neatly labeled. But then, tucked into the bottom right corner, a folder with no name. Just a period. Lucas clicked it. It opened to reveal 3 files. No extensions. Just strange names. Unfiltered. Before _ smile. Lucas. His hands stilled over the trackpad. He opened the first. Unfiltered. It was a collection of videos. Brian. Talking to the camera. No script. No lighting. Just him. In one, he looked exhausted, hair disheveled, eyes red. It was dated 6 months before he died. I don't know who I am when I'm not Brian Nguyen, VP of Strategy. I think I lost that person. I think I miss him. In another, he laughed, not his stage laugh, but real. Unrehearsed. Lucas used to make these dumb grilled cheese sandwiches with too much butter. I used to tease him for it. But God, I'd give anything to sit next to him now and just eat in silence. Lucas felt his throat tighten. He opened the second file, before _ smile. It was a document. They say high-functioning depression is invisible, but I was screaming every day, and people applauded the volume. I used to think my brother didn't want to be like me, but now I see I didn't have the courage to be like him. Lucas closed the laptop. The third file, Lucas, remained unopened. Not because he wasn't ready, but because for the first time, he realized he didn't need it. He knew what it would say. He knew Brian had loved him quietly, maybe even enviously. And Lucas knew, finally, that being the ordinary one had never meant being the lesser one. It had meant being real, being steady, being enough. He didn't open the file. Instead, he renamed the folder, The Truth, and left it there, as proof that behind every praise-soaked legacy, there is a person raw, flawed, and desperate to be seen. And someone, somewhere, must be brave enough to look. Chapter 10. The Letter in Brian's Safety Deposit Box. The call came on a gray Thursday, a few days before Lucas planned to leave Chicago for good. It was the bank, the branch where Brian had worked, where he was a vice president, where he'd shaken hands with city officials, posed for photos, and climbed ladders so fast he forgot the ground. Mr. Lucas Nguyen? This is Caroline from Chase Bank. We've been informed you're the next of kin with power of access regarding your brother's personal effects. There's a safety deposit box listed under his name. Do you have a moment? Lucas froze. He hadn't known there was one. He scheduled a time. 2 days later, he sat in a quiet room in the basement of the bank, a steel box resting on the table before him. A security guard had led him down without a word. The only sound in the room now was the buzz of fluorescent lights. He opened the box. Inside, a few documents. A photo of Brian and Erica on their wedding day. A USB drive. And a sealed envelope. It had one word on the front. Lucas. His heart kicked in his chest. He recognized Brian's handwriting immediately, tight, neat, a little slanted to the right. He opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated almost a year before Brian's death. Lucas, I don't know if this will ever reach you. I wrote it to keep myself honest. Or sane. Maybe both. I spent most of my life trying to become what everyone needed. The good son. The prodigy. The one who made it. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person and became a role. But you were always something I couldn't define. You didn't chase status. You didn't force smiles. You just lived. There were times I resented that. Times I thought you were taking the easy way out. But now I know you were taking the true way. I envied your quiet courage, the way you didn't need to be seen to be real. The way you helped people no one else noticed, maybe because you knew what that felt like. If I could do it all again, I wouldn't go to business school. I wouldn't climb the ladder. I'd sit with you and listen to your stories. I'd ask about your students. I'd say the things I only write here. I'm proud of you, Lucas. Even if I never said it. Especially because I never said it. If you're reading this, maybe I'm gone. Or maybe I've finally stepped off the stage. Either way, thank you. For being you. For being real. For surviving us all. Love. Brian. Lucas sat for a long time after finishing the letter. He didn't cry. Not the way he expected. The tears came slowly. Quietly. Like the letter itself, not demanding, not showy. Just true. He folded the paper gently and slipped it back into the envelope. Not to hide it, but to keep it. On his way out of the bank, the security guard held the door open and said softly, "He was a good man. We all thought the world of him." Lucas nodded. "He was a good man," he said. "But he was also a tired one." And for the first time, someone else nodded back. Not because they understood, but because Lucas had said it out loud. And that, he realized, was a start. Chapter 11. The last photo we took together. Lucas hadn't planned on visiting the lake. But the letter from Brian stayed folded in his wallet, warm from being near his chest for 2 straight days, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to him. Something in it asked for a return, not just to memory, but to a moment. So he drove to Montrose Beach, just outside downtown Chicago. It was where he and Brian had taken the last photo together, a random spring afternoon 3 years ago, when Lucas had visited for a weekend. It hadn't been a good visit. The conversation had been stiff. Brian had been on his phone most of the time, texting coworkers and clients. But there had been one brief moment, standing by the water, where Brian turned, half smiling, the wind catching his hair, and said, "Hey, let's take a picture. Mom will complain if we don't." They had laughed. A rare, real laugh. And Lucas had snapped a selfie of the two of them, awkward, unfiltered, windblown. Brian's tie was crooked. Lucas's face was squinting. It wasn't the kind of photo anyone framed. But it was real. Lucas found the exact spot. The rocks were still there. The skyline still stretched behind it like a painting that hadn't changed, even if the people in front of it had. He sat on the stone ledge and opened his phone. Scrolled back, way back, to 2019. And there it was. The photo. The last one they ever took together. He stared at it for a long time, then did something he never thought he would. He posted it. Just the photo. No filters. No hashtags. No explanations. Then, after a long pause, he wrote, "This was the last photo I took with my brother. We were both pretending to be okay. He more than me. I used to hate this photo. Now I think it's the most honest one we ever took. Not everyone who shines is happy, and not everyone who stays quiet is weak. I miss him. But more than that, I finally see him." He hit post. An hour later, sitting on the edge of the lake. His phone buzzed. A comment from a student at his nonprofit. "Thank you for this, Mr. Lucas. I always thought I was invisible in my family too. But maybe it just takes one person to say something. Maybe that person is me." Another came in. And another. Private messages. Emails. Quiet ripples in a quiet lake. Lucas leaned back, eyes closed. The wind picked up, cool and clean. He whispered to no one in particular. "You didn't disappear, Brian. Not really. You're just being seen differently now." And for the first time, he didn't feel like the shadow of his brother. He felt like someone holding the light. Chapter 12. When my mother finally asked about me, the house was quiet that evening. Dinner had been simple rice, steamed vegetables, and grilled chicken that neither of them really touched. His father had gone to bed early, a book forgotten on his lap in the living room. Lucas stood by the sink, rinsing a dish. When he felt his mother watching him from the kitchen doorway, she didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, towel in her hands, as if waiting for something to fall into place. "You're leaving tomorrow, right?" she finally asked. Lucas nodded. "Morning train." She stepped into the kitchen, pulled out a chair. "Sit with me a little?" It was the gentlest invitation she'd ever offered. Lucas dried his hands and sat across from her at the table. The same one they'd eaten every meal at when he was a boy, when Brian got seconds without asking and Lucas waited to be offered. His mother looked older in the dim light. Softer, too. Then she asked, "Lucas, what is it you do, exactly?" Lucas blinked. The question caught him off guard, not because it was hard to answer, but because it had never been asked. He thought for a moment. "I run writing workshops for teenagers. Mostly kids who've been through tough things, neglect, trauma, poverty. I help them tell their stories. Teach them how to put pain into words, so they can own it, not run from it." She nodded slowly. "You teach writing?" "I teach truth," he said gently. His mother looked down at her lap. "I used to think success was something you could touch. A title, a house, a bank account." Lucas said nothing. "I thought if I could hold it in one son, I wouldn't lose everything I came to this country for." Her voice trembled. "I didn't realize I was losing the other son in the process." Lucas swallowed. The air in the room thickened. Not with tension, but with something closer to grief. "You didn't lose me," he said. "I was here. I just stopped raising my hand." She looked at him, then really looked. Her eyes rimmed red. "But clear. Why didn't you ever fight for more attention?" Lucas gave a tired smile. "Because I didn't want to win by screaming. I wanted to be heard without having to shout." His mother reached across the table, placed her hand over his. It was small, cold, but firm. "I'm listening now." Lucas stared at their hands. For a long time, he didn't speak, didn't move. Then he said, "Thank you. I'm not going to ask why it took this long. I'm just glad we made it here." His mother nodded, silent tears on her cheeks. In that moment, neither of them needed to go back. Not to the mistakes, not to the hierarchy, not to Brian. All they needed was this seat, this table, this space where Lucas existed and was finally invited to stay. Chapter 13. What Brian wrote when he was 15. Lucas found the box by accident. He had gone up to the attic to help his mother look for an old rice cooker she insisted was definitely up there somewhere, though no one had touched that attic in years. The air was dusty, filled with the scent of cardboard and forgotten intentions. While moving aside a stack of yellowing tax documents, Lucas spotted a weathered shoebox labeled in faded marker. "Brian, school stuff, do not throw out." He sat cross-legged on the floor and opened it. Inside, a handful of report cards, ribbons from spelling bees, laminated certificates of excellence. All the usual trophies. All the curated proof of a perfect son. But tucked beneath the awards was a thin, spiral-bound notebook. The kind used in middle school, blue-lined pages, corners bent. A few doodles on the cover. Lucas opened to the first page. It was an English assignment. Write a personal essay on the topic, "Who am I?" He recognized the handwriting immediately. Brian's. A little messier than in later years, but still unmistakable. Lucas read, "My name is Brian Nguyen. I'm 15 years old. I get good grades. My parents say I'm the hope of the family. Sometimes I wonder if I'd still be the hope if I failed one test. Or if I said I didn't want to go to business school. I like making people proud. But sometimes when everyone claps, I feel like I'm performing in a play I didn't audition for. I think my brother, Lucas, is braver than me. He says what he thinks. He doesn't care if it's popular. Sometimes I wish I could be the younger brother. Just for a day. Just to be loved for breathing. Lucas closed the notebook. His hands were trembling. 15. Brian had already felt it at 15. The seed of all the pressure. The applause that felt like chains. The envy that wasn't toxic, just aching. The longing to be seen without earning it. He sat there for a long while. The box opened beside him, surrounded by forgotten honors, all the things Brian had been told to treasure, but none of which had saved him. Later that night, Lucas brought the notebook downstairs. His mother was on the couch, flipping through an old recipe book. He sat beside her, silent for a moment, then placed the notebook in her hands. She read quietly, page after page. And when she looked up, there were tears in her eyes, the quiet kind, not dramatic, not cinematic. Just grief, plain and human. He felt it even back then, she whispered. And I missed it. Lucas placed a hand on her back. So did I. They sat together on the couch, the lights dim, the pages of a 15-year-old boy's inner world resting on her lap. And for once, the trophies stayed in their boxes. But the truth that finally had a seat at the table. Chapter 14. The students who reminded me why I stayed. Lucas returned to Minneapolis 2 weeks later. The city felt smaller than before, but in a good way, like a room you once thought was cold, now familiar after you finally learned how to sit still in it. His apartment smelled faintly of sage and old paper. A half-drunk mug of coffee still sat on the counter, untouched since the day he left for Chicago. His inbox was flooded with unread emails, workshop materials, grant requests, volunteer sign-ups. But among them, one subject line stood out. "We missed you, Mr. Lucas. Please read in class?" It was from Lena, a 15-year-old from his Saturday writing circle. She was usually the last to speak, the first to leave, and had once confided in him that she only writes because it feels safer than talking. Lucas clicked the email. Inside was a letter, raw, unpunctuated, messy in a way only something honest could be. "Dear Mr. Lucas, when you weren't here, the room felt different. Like we were waiting for permission to be real again. No one laughed as much. No one stayed behind. So I wrote this. And I hope you read it aloud because you're the only one who makes our voices feel like they matter. You told me once that writing was how we leave proof. This is mine. I used to feel like I wasn't enough. That I had to be exceptional or disappear. But then I met a teacher who didn't care how polished my story was, just that it was mine. So now I write for the girl I used to be. And the girl I'm becoming. And the teacher who stayed." Lucas sat back in his chair. He didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, he smiled quietly. Gratefully. Because in that moment, Lena had said what Brian never got to. And what Lucas had forgotten for a little while. He wasn't here to be impressive. He was here to be present. That Saturday, he walked into the small community center, like he always did, hoodie on, coffee in hand, lesson plans scribbled on a yellow legal pad. The room lit up when he entered. "Mr. Lucas, you're back. We were gonna start without you, but it felt wrong." He laughed, sat down, and pulled Lena's email from his bag. "Before we start," he said, "someone wrote something worth hearing." He read her words aloud. And when he looked up, he saw something in their faces, awe, maybe. Or something better. Recognition. They knew what it was to feel invisible. But now, they were writing their way back into the world. Just like he had. Just like Brian had tried to. And this time, someone was listening. Chapter 15. The day I stopped being a shadow. It wasn't a grand moment. Not a podium. Not a spotlight. Not a stage with applause. It was a Tuesday. Lucas was sitting at the bus stop outside his apartment, the fall air crisp, his breath visible with every exhale. In one hand, he held a to-go cup of chai. In the other, Brian's old notebook, worn. Slightly bent at the corners, but still intact. He had carried it with him every day for the past month. Not as a symbol, not as guilt, just as a reminder of what pressure sounds like when it's written in private, of how praise can echo so loudly it drowns out the cries beneath it, and of a brother who never stopped watching, even from behind a mask. Across the street, a school bus pulled up. Kids filed out, some laughing, some quiet, some dragging their backpacks like anchors. One boy, no older than 10, wore a crooked tie and held a notebook too big for his frame. Lucas smiled. He pulled out his phone and opened the text he'd started weeks ago but never finished. It was for his mom. "Hey, Mom. You don't have to reply. I just wanted to say, I'm okay. Really okay. And I'm proud of how far we've all come. Also, if you ever want to come visit Minneapolis, I'll save you a seat at one of my writing workshops. Some of these kids would impress even you. Love. Lucas." He hit send. Then he looked up at the golden leaves swirling above the street and whispered, not to the wind, not to anyone watching, but to himself. "You did good, Brian. You made me see." And in return, Lucas had finally done the thing that neither of them had ever fully been allowed to do. He took up space. He stayed in the light. He stopped apologizing for not shining like someone else. He stood up, slung his bag over his shoulder, and walked into the rest of his life. Not as the quiet one, not as the brother of, but as Lucas. No shadow. Just him. Seen. And enough. Chapter 16. The Friend Who Knew the Hidden Name. Lucas found the contact in an old email thread Brian had forwarded to their dad years ago, some dry, logistical family matter. The CC list had included someone named James Wang, with a subject line Lucas remembered only vaguely, college reunion dinner next month? He dug deeper. A Facebook search. A LinkedIn profile. James Wang, clinical psychologist. Evanston, Illinois. Something clicked. He sent a message. Just a few lines. "Hi James, I'm Lucas, Brian's younger brother. I was wondering if we could talk. About him. About some things he left behind." James responded within the hour. "I've been waiting for this message since the day of his funeral. Let's meet. I'll tell you everything I can." They met at a small coffee shop near Northwestern University, the kind of quiet, academic spot filled with laptops and silence. James looked older than Lucas expected, a trimmed beard, worry lines. But his eyes were kind, alert, the kind of person who didn't look away when pain sat at the table. "Thank you for meeting me," Lucas began. James nodded. "You look like him." Lucas half smiled. "I never used to hear that. It was always, your brother, now he's really something." James didn't laugh. He just looked down at his coffee, stirred it once, and said, "Brian came to me almost 2 years ago. Not as Brian. He used a fake name." Lucas blinked. Why? Because he was terrified of being seen in that chair. The idea of being someone who needed help didn't match who he thought he had to be. So he created an alias. Paid in cash. No insurance. Lucas sat back. The pieces were falling together like glass shattering in slow motion. James continued. He talked about pressure. About performance. About being a symbol for his family. About you. Lucas looked up sharply. James nodded. He envied you. Deeply. Said you were living the life he wished he had the courage to choose. Lucas swallowed hard. I always thought he looked down on me. James shook his head. No. He said you had a kind of integrity he didn't know how to access anymore. That you didn't need applause to feel real. A silence passed between them. James reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the table. He asked me to give you this. I didn't know when. I thought, maybe when you were ready. Maybe when I was. Lucas opened the note. In Brian's handwriting, just one line. Don't carry the silence I died under. Lucas stared at the words. Tears didn't come, not yet. But something deeper did. Permission. Permission to tell the story. To challenge the illusion. To become not the footnote in Brian's legacy, but the narrator of his truth. As they stood outside, James said quietly, "I hope this brings you peace." Lucas nodded, voice soft but sure. "It brings me clarity. And maybe that's even better." He walked away, the note in his pocket, the words etched into his spine. He didn't know what tomorrow would look like. But he knew what it wouldn't look like. Silence. Chapter 17. The family knew, but never asked. Lucas didn't want to believe it at first. But the more people he spoke to, quiet conversations after the memorial, hushed comments at family dinners, even a slip of the tongue from an aunt, the more the picture became clear. Some of them knew. Maybe not all the details. Maybe not the full depth of Brian's unraveling. But they knew he wasn't okay. They just never asked. It began with his Uncle Huey. "Over coffee," he said, almost offhand. "Brian once told me he was thinking of leaving the firm. Said he was burning out. I told him, 'Don't be stupid. You're the golden goose.'" Lucas flinched. Uncle Huey chuckled, not noticing. "Can't blame me. Who walks away from 6 figures and a future like that?" Lucas stared into his coffee, hands tightening around the cup. Then came his cousin Mai. After dinner at her apartment, he emailed me late one night, asked what I thought about teaching. Said he envied how chill my life was. I thought he was drunk or something. She looked ashamed. I didn't reply. I thought if I did, I'd ruin the version of him everyone needed. Lucas didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The truth was laying itself bare, gently, without theatrics. Brian hadn't been hiding as well as everyone claimed. He was leaking pain. And people saw it. But in a family where success was gospel, to name his struggle would have been blasphemy. So, they looked away. That weekend, Lucas sat with his mother again. They were folding laundry. The TV was on in the background, muted. He turned to her quietly. "Did he ever tell you he wanted to quit?" She hesitated. Then, almost too softly, "Once." Lucas looked at her. She stared down at the towel in her lap. It was right after his last promotion. He came home, and we had dinner. He said, "Mom, I think I'm tired of all this. I want to teach, maybe." Lucas waited. I told him he was too smart for that. Her voice broke. I told him, "Don't waste your talent. You didn't come this far to be ordinary." She covered her face with her hands. Lucas reached for her wrist gently. "You didn't mean to hurt him." "But I did," she whispered. Lucas nodded, not in judgment, in recognition. We all did. That night, Lucas wrote something on a blank page in Brian's notebook. No plans to post it. No desire to be heard. Just a truth that needed to live somewhere outside his chest. Sometimes the most painful thing isn't that no one sees you. It's that they saw just enough and still chose not to ask. You were dying in plain sight, Brian. And now that I know, I will never let that happen again. Not to anyone. Chapter 18. Cleaning out Brian's room. The room hadn't changed. Not really. It still smelled faintly of cedar and aftershave. His watch sat on the dresser. A worn leather belt hung over the back of a chair. The bed was made too perfectly. The books on the shelf stood upright in order of height, color coordinated. A life preserved in symmetry. Lucas stood at the doorway, hands in his pockets, just looking. His mother had asked him the night before, "Will you help me sort through it?" He said yes. But now, inside the room, he hesitated. Because cleaning it meant admitting something final. That Brian wouldn't walk back in, loosen his tie, collapse onto the bed, sigh, and say, "Man, long day." That this wasn't his room anymore. It was a memory. A museum. He started with the desk. The top drawer held pens arranged like surgical tools. A notebook filled with meeting minutes, every page marked with timestamps, client names, numbers, and goals. Then, beneath that, a leather-bound journal. Lucas opened it cautiously. He didn't know Brian had kept two. This one wasn't like the first. The handwriting was more erratic. Crossed out lines. Messy. Like he'd written it not to preserve clarity, but to survive chaos. Lucas flipped to a page somewhere in the middle. They say the body keeps the score. So what happens when the soul's exhausted, but the body keeps showing up? I want to scream at everyone. I want to cry in the middle of a staff meeting and see if anyone notices. Today, Lucas texted me, said he saw one of his students publish a poem. He was proud. Like really proud. No bonus. No certificate. Just proud. What the hell is that like? Lucas's breath hitched. He hadn't remembered that text. Just a photo he'd sent. A scanned copy of a student's work. Scribbled with teenage metaphors and dreams too big for grammar. Brian had responded simply. Cool. That was all. Just cool. And yet behind it, this. Lucas shut the journal gently and pressed it to his chest. Later, in the closet, he found the suit Brian wore the last time the family posed together, the Christmas photo, their mom still framed. Brian had been beaming. Lucas had been standing on the edge, half out of the frame. He ran his fingers across the fabric. He didn't cry. Instead, he sat on the bed and whispered, I'm sorry I didn't ask more either. He didn't just mean about the pain. He meant, what music do you listen to when you're alone? Did you ever wish we'd stayed closer? Were you ever afraid you were the only one pretending? Lucas looked around. The room wasn't cold anymore. It was honest now. Not curated. Not polished. Just full of unspoken things finally being seen. He packed a box of personal items to keep. The second journal. A photo of the two of them as kids in matching pajamas. A single sticky note found under the desk lamp. Ordinary is a miracle. I just didn't know it in time. Lucas folded it and tucked it into his wallet, right next to Brian's last letter. Then he turned off the light, closed the door softly behind him, and whispered, Rest now. I'll carry the rest. Chapter 19. The letter I wrote to a student who was about to quit. It was a Tuesday when Lucas received the email. Subject line. I don't think I'm meant for this. It was from Jaden. One of his quieter students, 16, shy, always the last to share in the writing circle, but with a sharp mind and a gift for metaphor that made even his clumsiest lines feel alive. The message was short. Mr. Lucas, I'm dropping the program. It's not for me. I'm just not someone who's meant to tell their story. There are louder people, more important people. I just don't want to pretend I matter when I know I don't. Thanks for trying anyway. Lucas stared at the screen. For a moment, he saw Brian. For a longer moment, he saw himself. That same voice. Years ago, whispering. You're not enough. You don't shine like he does. Don't speak unless it's impressive. And so Lucas didn't reply right away. He pulled out Brian's second journal. Flipped to a page he'd dog-eared. I remember once, Lucas gave me a birthday card with a dumb joke on it. I pretended not to care. But it was the only thing that day that didn't feel like a performance. Lucas smiled, then opened a blank Word doc and began to type. Subject. Before you go. Jaden. I know that voice in your head. The one telling you you're too quiet, too soft, too small. That voice is loud, not because it's right, but because you've heard it too long. But I need you to hear this one, just once. From someone who almost left too. You matter. Quietly. Deeply. Unapologetically. You don't have to write like anyone else. You don't have to speak louder. You just have to stay. Because sometimes, survival itself is the most radical kind of story. My brother didn't get to hear that in time. But maybe you can. You're not invisible. Not to me. Not to this group. Not to the world that still needs people like you to tell the truth others are too busy to say. So, if you walk away, I'll respect it. But if you stay, even one more session, I promise. We'll save you a seat. No pressure. No spotlight. Just presence. Warmly. Mr. Lucas. He hit send. 3 days later, Jaden showed up. Didn't say much. Just walked in, dropped his backpack, and nodded at Lucas. After class, as the students filed out, Jaden lingered. He looked down at the floor and said, barely above a whisper, "Your brother, he sounds like he was really tired." Lucas nodded. He was, but now he's resting. And I'm still here, helping the ones who are tired, but not gone. Jaden met his eyes for the first time. Thanks for not letting me quit. Lucas placed a hand on his shoulder. Thanks for staying. In that moment, Lucas didn't feel like someone chasing meaning anymore. He was living it in real time, in real lives. And somewhere, maybe in memory, maybe in something quieter, Brian was proud. Chapter 20. The talk I gave on the value of being ordinary. Lucas almost said no. When the community college reached out asking him to speak at their annual youth forum, he hesitated. Public speaking wasn't his thing. He preferred small rooms, quiet conversations, the kind of impact that didn't need a microphone. But the email had a line that stuck with him. Our students feel lost between expectations and identity. We think you might help them feel seen. So he said yes. The event was held in a modest auditorium, the kind with faded maroon curtains and flickering overhead lights, folding chairs, a simple wooden podium. Nothing flashy. Just like he liked it. Lucas stepped up when his name was called. He wore a simple button-down and jeans. No slideshow. No rehearsed speech. Just a folded paper in his pocket and the truth in his hands. He looked out at the room. Teenagers, teachers, a few parents. Some eager, some tired, some already scrolling on their phones. He smiled. Hi, I'm Lucas Nguyen. I teach writing to students who don't think they have anything to say, until they do. A few chuckles. A few eyes lifted. He continued. I grew up in a family where being ordinary wasn't enough. Where success looked like awards and job titles and applause. My older brother had all of it. He paused. And I thought if I didn't shine like he did, I didn't matter. Now the room was still. But here's what no one tells you. Being ordinary, being present, being real. Being kind, that's not failure. That's courage. My brother once said he wished he could live like me. At the time, I didn't understand why. Now I do. He stepped away from the podium. His voice lowered, not for effect, but for intimacy. Ordinary doesn't mean small. It means you don't need to be watched to be valuable. It means you get to breathe without performing. He pulled the folded paper from his pocket. Brian's words. The sticky note. Ordinary is a miracle. I just didn't know it in time. Lucas held it up. He didn't get to stay. But you can. You can live loud without being famous. You can take up space without taking over the room. You can matter without proving anything. Silence. Then, slowly, hands began to clap. Not thunderous. Not forced. Just real. One by one. And Lucas, standing there, didn't feel extraordinary. He felt whole. And for the first time, maybe ever, that was enough. After the event, a student came up to him, tall, awkward, hands in his hoodie. Hey, Mr. Lucas? Thanks for saying all that. Lucas smiled. Thanks for listening. The student nodded. My dad only notices me when I win stuff. I always thought I had to be the best version of me to matter. Lucas looked him in the eye. You matter exactly as you are. Even when no one claps. The boy nodded again, slower this time. Then walked away. And Lucas stood there, watching him disappear into the crowd, feeling like something deep inside him had finally settled. Not like a secret, not like a burden, but like a root. Chapter 21. My father asked me if I was happy. It was a Sunday morning when it happened. Quiet, over tea. The way the rarest truths often arrive. Lucas was back in Chicago for a short visit, a long weekend, nothing more. He hadn't planned anything meaningful. No deep conversations. No symbolic goodbyes. Just time. His father was already at the table when Lucas walked into the kitchen. He was sipping green tea from his favorite mug, a chipped one with a faded American flag and the words "hard work never fails" on it. Lucas poured himself a cup, sat down across from him. No words at first. Just steam and the ticking of the old wall clock. Then his father said, "You seem lighter." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "That a good thing?" His father gave a rare half-smile. "Yes, it is." A pause. Then, in a tone more tentative than Lucas had ever heard from him, "Lucas, are you happy?" The question landed gently, not like an interrogation. More like a man finally learning how to ask the right thing. Lucas blinked. In his whole life, he couldn't remember his father ever asking that. Not "what are you doing" or "how's work?" or "are you making enough money?" But this? Happy? He took a breath. "Yeah, I am." His father nodded slowly, as if trying to absorb the answer. "To trust it?" Lucas continued. "I used to think I wasn't supposed to be. That I didn't earn the right. Like, because I wasn't impressive, I didn't get to be content." His father looked down at his hands, calloused. Still strong despite the years. "I didn't know how to raise someone who didn't want the same things I did." Lucas shrugged. "You didn't have to know. You just had to ask." Silence again. But not the heavy kind. The kind that holds room for change. Then his father said, "I was proud of Brian because he made life look easy. But now I think I should have been proud of you sooner because you made life real." Lucas looked at him and smiled. Later that day, they went for a walk around the neighborhood. Nothing fancy. Just two men, father and son, side by side, not competing, not performing, not trying to fix what couldn't be undone. Just being. And as the wind rustled the trees above them, Lucas realized something. He wasn't trying to be seen anymore. He was seen. Not by everyone, but by the people who mattered now. And maybe, just maybe, by himself. Chapter 22. Brian's Scholarship Fund and the Email That Changed Everything. The idea came quietly. Lucas was sitting in his apartment one evening, going through his inbox, when he opened an old folder titled Brian's Notes. He hadn't touched it in weeks, maybe out of preservation, maybe out of fear. But tonight felt right. Among the journal scans, voice memos, and photos, one document caught his attention. It was labeled, "Draft, the next chapter." Lucas clicked it. It was a short outline, unfinished. But in it, Brian had written, "If I ever get out of this career, I want to do something for kids like Lucas's students. Not the polished ones. The ones still figuring it out. Especially the ones nobody sees. Maybe a scholarship. Nothing flashy. Just something real." Lucas stared at the screen, heart tightening. His brother had wanted to give back, not in headlines, not in performance, but in truth. And he hadn't made it in time. But maybe Lucas could. The next week, Lucas sent an email to the director of the community foundation he'd worked with before. He outlined Brian's story carefully, honestly, without shame or embellishment, and attached a proposal for the Brian Nguyen Ordinary is Enough Fund, a small annual scholarship, awarded to a graduating high school senior who'd overcome invisible burdens, anxiety, family pressure, loneliness, and had shown resilience not through accolades, but by simply staying. He wrote, "My brother died under the weight of being everything to everyone. He didn't need saving, he needed space to breathe. This scholarship isn't for top grades or top schools. It's for the kids who show up when it's hardest, who carry the quiet battles, who need to know that being here is already enough." He wasn't sure what would happen. But a week later, the reply came. "Lucas, we're moved beyond words. We'd be honored to help you make this real." 2 months later, they announced it. A simple website. A 2-minute video. A quote from Brian's journal on the landing page. "Ordinary is a miracle. I just didn't know it in time." Applications began pouring in, not thousands, not viral, but real. One from a girl who'd taken care of her siblings alone for 3 years. One from a boy who had survived depression and now ran peer support circles. One from a student with dyslexia who still wrote poetry in her phone's notes app every night. Lucas read every single one and cried, not out of sadness, but because he knew now. Brian didn't vanish. Brian became a bridge. One night, weeks after the fund launched, Lucas received an email from a student he didn't know. No subject line. Just a message. I didn't win. But I applied. And, for the first time, I wrote something I didn't delete. I didn't know I was allowed to take up space until I read your brother's story. Thank you for making people like us visible. Lucas sat back in his chair, hands trembling slightly. He looked up, whispering into the still room. You did it, Brian. We did. And this time, the silence felt full. Chapter 23. The Student Who Called Me Brave. The letter came folded in a hand-drawn envelope. No stamps. No email. Just slipped into Lucas's mailbox at the community center, tucked between a stack of workshop printouts and a reminder about the copier being jammed again. On the front, in careful handwriting. For Mr. Lucas, from someone learning to speak. He opened it slowly. Inside, a single page, lined and a little smudged, written in pencil. Dear Mr. Lucas, you probably don't remember me. I only came to 3 sessions. I sat in the back. I never read out loud. But you looked at me like I was allowed to exist. You said once that being here is already enough. I didn't believe you at the time. But I went home and copied that line into my sketchbook. Every day for a week. Then one night I wrote something. Just a few lines. It wasn't good. But I didn't tear it up. That was a first. I've started writing more since then. Not to be published. Just to remember I'm real. People say brave is standing on stage or speaking loud. But I think brave is showing up when you don't think anyone will notice. So I just wanted to say, I think you're brave. Not because you shout, but because you stayed. Thank you for showing me that quiet people can still echo. A student who's still learning. Lucas folded the letter with a care usually reserved for glass. He placed it in the same drawer where he kept Brian's last note, Lena's poem, and the sticky note about ordinary being a miracle. Not because it was fragile, but because it was proof. Proof that words mattered. That presence mattered. That being brave didn't require a stage or a speech or a spotlight. It just needed sting. That evening, Lucas sat on his apartment floor, the letter in his lap, and thought about Brian. About the days when he must have felt small behind his suits. About how he'd once said, I don't know who I am without the claps. And Lucas whispered into the quiet room. You were always someone, even without the applause. And now, so was he. Brave. Not for rising, but for remaining. Chapter 24. The last thing my mother ever said about Brian. It was early spring in Chicago. The snow had melted, leaving behind soft puddles and blooming cherry blossoms along the old streets in the Vietnamese neighborhood where Lucas grew up. The house looked the same, white paint chipping slightly. Wind chimes tapping softly in the breeze. Lucas came for a weekend visit. No reason. No holiday. Just time. He found his mother in the backyard, pruning the small herb garden she had ignored all winter. She looked up as he walked out the back door. These things always survive, huh, she said, holding a cluster of green onion between her fingers. Lucas smiled, even when we forget them. They sat on the back steps. A familiar silence stretched between them, but now it wasn't avoidance. It was comfort. Then, without warning, she said, You know, Brian never liked his birthday parties. Lucas turned toward her. She was staring into the garden, not at him. Every year. I made a big deal. Balloons, cake, so many people. And every year, he got quiet after. I used to think it was just exhaustion. But maybe it was something else. Lucas waited. He told me once, She continued that he felt like those parties weren't for him. They were for us. For me. So I could say, look what I raised. Her voice was steady, but there was a shimmer in her eyes. I thought if I could keep him bright, I wouldn't have to face what was dim in myself. Lucas didn't rush to fill the silence. He let it be. Then she looked at him, really looked, as if the years between them had thinned. He was tired, wasn't he? Lucas nodded. Very. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out something small, a laminated photo. Faded. Wrinkled from years of being touched. It was Brian, maybe 10 years old, sitting on the swing in the backyard. Smiling, unaware of anything but the sun. She handed it to Lucas. Keep it. I have another one just like it. He took it gently. Then she said, soft, but clear. I used to think Brian was the one who lit the house. But it turns out, it's you who kept the light on after he was gone. Lucas didn't speak. He didn't need to. They sat there, in the afternoon sun, among the herbs and wind chimes and small signs of life. No tears. Just truth. And that was the last thing she ever said about Brian. Not because there was nothing more to say, but because, finally, nothing had to be fixed. Only held. Chapter 25. I wrote something for myself, and it was enough. It was raining in Minneapolis. Not the kind of rain that floods or shouts, but the soft, steady kind that taps gently against windows. Like an old friend reminding you they're still here. Lucas sat alone in the writing studio after hours. The room was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of a single desk lamp. On the whiteboard behind him were remnants of the last workshop, half-erased quotes, a doodle in the corner, and 3 words circled in red, write your truth. He stared at the blank page in front of him. Not his laptop, a sheet of paper. He wanted to feel the ink, the weight, the pause between sentences. He hadn't written anything for himself in months. He thought of Brian, of the letter, the journals, the voice that had echoed long after the applause stopped. He thought of his students, of Lena, Jaden, the anonymous note, of every kid who sat in the back and wondered if their silence made them invisible. And he thought of himself, not as a brother, not as a son, not as someone trying to earn love, just Lucas. So he picked up his pen, and he wrote, I used to believe I had to be impressive to be enough. That if I didn't shine, I wouldn't be seen. But now I know, light doesn't always have to blind. Sometimes it just has to warm. I've spent years carrying echoes of what I wasn't, of who I should have been. But today, I'm laying them down. Not because I've finally become extraordinary, but because I've finally learned how to stay, just as I am. And that for the first time is enough. He put down the pen. Didn't read it over. Didn't polish it. Didn't ask what someone else might think. He folded the paper, tucked it into his notebook. Not to hide it, to keep it close. Outside, the rain kept falling. Gentle, steady, honest. Lucas leaned back, closed his eyes, and exhaled. And in that moment, no audience, no brother to catch up to, no expectations to outrun, he felt whole. Just a man, in a quiet room, writing something for himself. And for once, that was more than enough.